Okay,
What are the
so we're going to be
oh,
off and running now. Whoever joins us, joins us. This is Jim Doty doing a webinar, and I think the topic is three questions that will help you save time and be more efficient, something along that line. For those of you who don't know Jim Doty, he's been in the business for well over 30 years. I've known him for quite a few years, probably I'd say, at least 6, 7 years that I can remember.
probably
Uh,
longer.
yeah, probably longer than that. But yeah, if
Time
somebody can,
flies.
one thing I learned from Jim years ago, there's always solution for things, and that kind of thinking always helps you get things done in your business. So if you haven't reached out to Jim and see how he can help your clients and make sure your deals don't fall apart, reach out to him, and we'll put everything, his contact information shortly. For those of you who just jumped in, again, this is a three questions that will save you time and energy and be more productive by Jim Doty with JMJ Financial. I'm going to open the chat box if you want to type in any questions, but I'll let Jim take over. This will be recorded. By you being on this webinar, you're consenting to the recording. We're not advertising this. I'll send anybody that wants a copy of this webinar recording for your purposes, but we'll use it as a teaching tool. So, Jim, without further ado, it's your webinar. Go ahead.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Dan. So let's talk about where rates are today. I get that question, and it's probably a good idea because rates change on a daily basis. They're based off the 10-year Treasury bond. And sometimes people hear in the news, all rates are down, and hear all these, you see these advertisements you get in the mail like 1.95 and a lot of this. So let me kind of go over where rates are today in a general sense so that people have an idea. The first issue is there are three different type of loan amounts that banks look at. And the loan amounts currently are from $0 to 548,250. That's considered conforming rates, conforming loan amounts. Those rates are generally the best rates because those are the lowest loan amounts. And those particular uh, loan amounts attract, where rates are depending on loan to value, where your FICO score is, and what your ratios are. Rates are in the high twos for conforming loan amounts. So today, if you were if you were doing a purchase and it was your loan amount was 500,000 purchase, money, you would be at probably around 2 3/4 on a 30-year fix today. On a 15-year fix, you'd probably be at about 2.375. So on a 30-year fix, 2 3/4. On a 15-year, you'd probably be at 2.375. Now, some people will say, "Hey, I see these advertisements at 1.875, 1.9." You know, what a lot of these companies do is they'll do what's called come-ons. Basically, "Hey, give me a call." They float this number out at you, but they don't tell you that it's going to cost 2 points or 3 points to get that rate. So they get you on the phone, they try to sell you the deal, and so on and so on. But how interest rates are looked at is very simple. What is it? Are we doing a single family residence or a condo? Pricing is different between a single family residence and condominiums. Condominiums are higher priced. The Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, when they price in for condos, they generally price in about an eighth or a quarter worse in rates for condominiums. They don't like condos, so they give a better pricing to single family residents. The other factors that go into play is your FICO scores. The higher the FICO score, the better your rate. If your FICO score is over 720, you get a better rate. If it's under 720, you get a little bit less of a rate. If it's over 750, you get a better rate. If it's over 780, you get a better rate. So all of those things apply when people are asking about interest rate. The other thing is debt ratios. We can go to 50% on conventional. We can go to 56.9 on government FHA. On VA, I've gone as high as 60% on back end. So VA doesn't really have any kind of ratio issue, but the best pricing on government is obviously VA. The vets do get amazing pricing no matter what their FICO, no matter what their ratios are, they get really good pricing. But FHA and conventional are capped. So the lower your ratios, the better your pricing is as well. So that gives you an idea for conventional. The next tier is called high balance. High balance is from 548,250 up to 822,375. So if you fall into a loan amount between 549 and 822,375, it's considered high balance loan amount. That pricing is generally higher than conforming loan amounts. That pricing is generally about a 1/4% higher in rates than it is for conforming loan amounts. Now, the high balance today is on a purchase money is probably running somewhere between 3% and 3.125 on a 30-year fix today. So if you have good credit and you're putting 20% down and it's a single family residence, you're probably going to be in that category. If you're at a condo, your pricing is probably going to be a little bit higher, probably around 3.25 if it's high balance. If it's conforming, you'd probably be around 3%. So that gives you an idea of the pricing on high balance. It follows the same criteria as far as FICO and also ratios, but the pricing is generally skewed a little higher because of the loan amounts. The next category up from 822,375 to infinity is jumbo rates. Jumbo rates are based on private lending. Freddie and Fannie do not get involved with jumbo pricing. So jumbo pricing comes directly from the banks and the insurance companies. Now, there are companies out there that price them out, such as Wells, B of A, Chase, Citi, US Bank. These are probably the top lenders in jumbo pricing. Their guidelines are completely different than Freddie and Fannie. They're way more strict and they're way more tight. So when we're dealing with somebody like buying a 1.5 or $1.7 million pricing, their guidelines are completely different. You have to be under 43% on the back end of ratios. What do I mean by back end? That means you have to have your mortgage payment plus your credit cards, car payments, student loans, any other properties you may own, has to all be under 43%, under whatever your gross income is. It's important because the structure and the guidelines are so strict on jumbos. They're very difficult to get these days. A lot of people don't have ratios under 43%. Then you say, oh, what do we do? Well, a lot of times when I get a jumbo loan, if it's about $1.3 million, $1.4 million, $1.5 million, I usually break up the loan. I'll do an $822,000 375 first. The client will put their 10%, 15% down, or 20% down, and then I'll do a second for the difference. And the reason why I do a first and a second is because the guidelines are way easier to deal with. I can go on my higher ratios, I can qualify easier, and it saves time. Who do I use on seconds? Generally, most of the credit unions. I'll use Universal, I'll use Nikkei, I'll use most of the top credit unions in the country. And the reason why we use those is because they're easier to deal with in conjunction with a purchase. And their guidelines are very similar to what Freddie and Fannie are. So their qualifications are similar. That's why it's important to know when people say, hey, what's my interest rate? It really depends on what you're buying, what you're purchasing, and where you are in the mix. That's why when you are out there selling a house, if you're selling a $1.2 million house, and the guy's going to come in and put down 10 or 15%, right away he's going to be in a high balance loan. If you're selling a $600,000 house and he's going to put down 20%, he's going to be in a conforming loan. So you have an idea of where their loan qualifications are going to be and what they need to qualify for. Remember, Freddie and Fannie, you can qualify up to 50% on the back end, and there's a front end and a back end. Let me go over that real quick just so everybody understands that. The front end consists of your principal and interest payment, your property taxes, and your fire insurance, plus any Mello-Roos or HOA. We deal with that all the time. So that's called the front end. Whatever that payment is, generally you want to be under 45% of whatever your gross income is. The back end is going to be credit cards, car payments, boat payments, alimony, child support, uh, you know, student loans, uh, if they own other property, those will all come into play, what's considered back end. Now, a lot of times we have self-employed borrowers. If they're self-employed, they're even more trickier because you got to take an average of their income. So the qualifications are completely different for them. But just to give you some basics, when you're out there and you're selling your property or you're out taking buyers on a property and you're looking at a $1 million property and they want to put down 10% or 5%, you got to know what the guidelines are, the ratios are, so that you're not wasting your time. If you're going to buy $1 million property, the minimum you're going to have to put down is 10%. Can't do a 5% on $1 million. But these are just things to give you an idea of when you're out there, so you're not wasting your time. Any questions so far on it, where interest rates are, or any of those?
No, I think I'm getting it. It's good.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions on where rates are today and how they're looked at?
No.
Okay, great. All right, so let's move on to some other issues. So let's say you're sitting, I get this all the time when you're sitting in open houses. I just sat an open house this weekend up in San Canyon. It was a $2 million house. Clients came in and they didn't have an agent, and they basically, the agent met them at the door and started showing them the house. And basically at that point, she showed them all the features of the house, and the house is great. And I noticed, when she was talking to them, she didn't really get into, a couple of easy questions to figure out if these were legitimate buyers, or, if this house was out of their price range. Now, $2 million, you got to have a certain amount of income, and you've got to at least you got to know what you're talking about.
Hey,
There's
Jim, before
there's
you
ways
go,
to,
Jim, quick
yep.
question for you. You may be covering it, but before you go into that, I'm curious. For $2 million house, what's the income? What do you need to show?
You're probably going to be
Roughly.
somewhere around 300,000, depending on what your debt is. I mean, a
Gotcha.
minimum of $30,000 a month gross income. I mean, if you're going to carry 20%, which is 1.5 million, you're going to put down 320,000. You're going to carry 1.17, 1.6, and you figure your payment's going to be around, depending on if they have Melrose or they don't, but your payment's going to be up there around you know somewhere between $6, $7, and $8,000 a month. If your payment
Wow.
around $6, $7, $8,000 a month, you better make sure, darn sure, these guys are qualified, or they know what you're doing. Same thing with whether it's $600,000 house,
Sure.
you still want to kind of know the same thing. But my question is, or my point was, is she didn't really kind of ask a couple key questions which you can fit in a normal conversation without being intrusive, you know. And it's very simple. It's like, the first question, like when you come in, you say, oh, I know it's a lovely house, everything is good. Oh, by the way, have you been pre-qualified? And the question is, everybody should at least be pre-qualified before they come to a home. These days, most of the agents are making sure that somebody has a pre-approval letter. I think it should be standard anymore. You want to see at least a DU or an approval from an established lender, because you don't want clients coming in and wasting your time. You're setting up appointments, and your time is valuable. But she didn't even ask that question. The other thing, what do you do for a living? Like, it's not uncommon to say, do you work in the area? Like, what do you do? And you can fit that in a normal conversation. Doesn't mean that you're being intrusive. You're just saying, hey, this is our neighborhood. I'd like to tell you a little bit about it. How far do you work? What do you do? Blah, blah, blah. You just kind of fit it in a conversation. Most people will tell you in 2 seconds. They'll say, hey, I'm director of NASA. This guy happened to be the assistant director of NASA. So, this guy, I knew right away that this guy's minimum income was probably going to be $200,000 to $300,000, and he's going to be in that category. And you know, I ended up asking the questions, but you know, just to find out a little bit more about him, so that she knew that this guy was legitimate coming in the door. And if he didn't have representation, it would be a great buyer for her to pick up. You know, just because she was sitting on this particular open house, it may not be the particular house for them, but hey, you can say, hey, I know about this listing down the road. I'd love to show it to you, blah, 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 blah. Next thing you know, you got a $2 million buyer and you're getting 2.5% on $2 million. It's not a bad way to pick up clientele. And so those are very key questions when you're
So
looking
let's recap that. The questions would be, are you pre-qualified, correct? That's
yeah,
fine.
you want to know, you want to make sure that they, when they come in the door, have they been pre-approved? You know, who have they working with a bank, they're working with a broker, they're working with an outside area agent, you know, lender. These are pretty easy questions to ask when you're at least talking about financing. That's the first basic question, because if they haven't even talked to anybody, then you have no idea where they could be at. I mean, I get all the time, you know, I get agents call me all the time. Oh, this guy is he's rich, he makes a ton of money, he's got assets, I know his family, blah 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 blah. And I can't tell you, sitting here, how many times I'll look at a file and they got a problem. Everybody, I can tell you right now, everybody has some issue going on. You know, so it's just a matter of how to weed those issues out, and what do we need to do to limit you know, our exposure and your exposure, so that you're not wasting your time. So that's a key question, is like, have you been a pre-approved? Then the next key question is what do you do? Like, what's your income? Is it you and your wife qualifying? You know, is it you qualifying? It's a very simple question about, you know, what do you do for a living, so that you know whether you're dealing with self-employed borrowers or you're dealing with W-2 borrowers. And the reason why that's important is because the qualifications are completely different for a self-employed borrower. If the guy goes, oh, I own my own company, you know, I make a ton of money, blah blah blah. Inevitably, people who think they own a company and they show, you know, gross revenue of like 700,000. I have a doctor right now, a very smart doctor, right? She's a psychologist. You know, she has a huge, great practice, and but she doesn't know the difference between gross and net. You know, I mean, literally, she's out looking at $1.5 million homes, $1.5 million condo, and she says, well, I make $700,000. Now I'm on the phone with her and her accountant, right? And so the accountant kind of chuckles a little bit, and I've been looking at her numbers, and I go, doctor, you don't make $700,000. You made $700,000, but you only paid Uncle Sam, you know, $100,000. So, you know, you're looking for $1.5 million property, and you only showed $100,000. That's like, you know, 8,300 in income a month. You
Right.
don't qualify for a washing machine for $1.5 million. You might be, you know, at 700,000, you might be okay, but you know, at freaking 1.5 million, you're not. So she had a reason, and thank goodness she hadn't filed her 2020 taxes. So after I got done, you know, talking with her and her accountant and me figured out, okay, where she needed to be on income in order to qualify. So those are key questions. You want to know if they're self-employed, because people have this misconceived idea, because they own a business, they make all this money. But a lot of times self-employed borrowers are the hardest people to get done, because like anything, they have great accountants and they want to write everything off. So, you know, the good news is, basically, when you're doing these open houses, if somebody comes into you and says, hey, you know, I'm self-employed, radar should go up right away going, okay, that's good. He's self-employed. That's a good thing. But we don't know what you're really qualified for until you get in to talk to a professional. And those are very key questions. You know, anybody have any questions on that approach, or how, because you guys have all sat tons of open houses, you've all worked with different buyers. I'm sure you guys have had some of your own techniques. Is there anybody out there that you know, has run into something similar to that? Rob, you got anything like that? Did I lose everybody?
It's not as hard nowadays, especially with the COVID climate, to get people to get pre-approved. For example, on all my listings, nobody come in there unless I get a pre-approval letter. You don't want to waste the seller's time, or if you got a tenant on the property, or your time by having looky-loos. And a little tougher on an open house, but certainly you don't want to waste time showing properties to somebody who can't afford to buy something. You waste gas at $4+ a gallon, and time and energy for somebody that can't buy.
Mhm.
Right, absolutely. I think the key is what they want. I want to tell them somewhere. A lot of times they'll do pre-approvals, Dan, these days, and like I said, you usually if you're sitting on a listing, you can't even get in the listing without showing an approval or have a pre-approval with you. So, which is a good thing, I think.
Right.
So, anybody have any questions on any of those? Anybody out there? Rob, you got anything? Blanca?
No, I was thinking about with the coronavirus, how we always asking for the pre-approval letter. Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep, I hear you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Blanca.
Yeah. So that's a very smart thing to do because sometimes you're afraid to approach, the business right away when people walk in. We should have another technique so people that just enter in the property, they have to have a pre-approval letter before we can even get them in. Um,
That's what a lot of, let me just say this, Blanca, you're right on the money. All agents that I know of right now, 90% of them out there, if an agent calls up to set up an appointment to see a property, they say, okay, fine, here's my fax or my email, send me over a copy of your approval for your clients. What time do you want to come? So you either have a pre-approval letter or a DU. You can request either one. If you want to request a DU, that's a desktop underwriting, depending on the purchase price of the property. So it really, really, you should do it all the time. COVID, forget COVID. It
Right.
should be a standard practice so that you know that these clients that are showing the house are at least somewhat pre-qualified or at least have somewhat talked to a professional.
right.
And, so that when you get 15 offers or 5 offers, at least already kind of which ones have already been talking to a lender or which ones aren't. I think it should be standard. That's just my personal opinion.
It's
Yeah.
Hey,
not
so,
that tough nowadays. It's really not that tough to ask for that. Like I said, I put down all my agent remarks when somebody requests a showing. I send them a text or an email back with what I need. And even if I book an appointment for them, I cancel the appointment if I don't get those documents. They just got to play by the book. You don't want to waste the seller's time. If you have a tenant, you don't want to waste a tenant or your time. And
Yeah.
again, if they're willing to go through the process in those loops, they're a little more serious.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
absolutely. And you're not wasting your time, Blanca. I mean, especially like, I get a lot of times, especially in the lower end properties, you get a ton of people coming through a lot, and half of them can't qualify,
Yeah.
so you don't want, like I said, you don't want to waste your time. These are very important things to do. But you want to make sure, like when you do have these simple 3 questions. One is, have you gotten pre-approved? If
Yeah.
the answer is you've got them ahead of time, great. Then the next question is, like I said, what do you do for a living? Do you own your own company or are you W-2?
Right.
That gives you a lot of information, just that one question. Like you already know if he's self-employed, then it's going to be a little bit difficult or different in qualifying. So this gives you an idea. Third
So
question.
hang on, Jim. Before you do, this is important. Don't lose that thought. We
Yep,
can work on some of those things on the role play and group role play every Thursday, 11:30. But part of it is skill and not looking like you're interrogating the person. There's questions you can
absolutely.
use that don't. If you, hey, what do you do? Stuff like this is not an interrogation room, but if you use things like, may I ask, I was wondering, I'm
Mhm.
curious, words like that, if you don't mind me asking, then they don't feel like you're forcing them. And if you don't do it
Right.
all at once, it's a skill where
Mhm.
you're not feeling like you're putting that person against the wall. So it's an important skill that all of you should work on. We can work on that on the interactive group role play. Every
Here's a
Thursday.
great here's a great opening line. It's like, and it's very easy conversation. You just say, oh, do you live in the area? You know,
Exactly.
do you live in the area? And the guy says, no, we live in Glendale. Oh, okay, yeah. What do you do? What do you do down in Glendale? Like, you're moving the kids up here. You're gonna love our area. Is your work close by? What do you do? It's a very simple question
Yeah.
within a friendly question. You're not interrogating that particular person. That person doesn't feel like it's just a personal conversation with everything.
That's
Um,
a valid point. Very valid point.
yeah, and the same thing, like you work in, because you guys always work in these questions like, oh, where the kids go to school. Oh, then we talk about the school for a few seconds. Oh, we got a great high school, we got a great elementary, we have a park right next door, blah, 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 and you kind of just work those questions in. So I think there's a way to do it when you're at an open house and you have a friendly conversation. Now, when you're busy, you got two or three, clients at the same time, you can't always get to everybody.
Right.
But if you can, great. If you can't, then you totally understand. When you guys are looking at uh, offers, let's talk about that for a second because it's really key when you guys are looking at offers. One of the things when you're looking at an offer to decide, do I take this guy or do I not take this guy? You want to know a that whoever they're working with on the lending side is credible. And how do you know what you're dealing with? Well, it's a simple. It's very simple. If you have a guy that's local, most of us know all the local guys. If it's somebody that's out of the area, which a lot of times it has been lately, we get a lot of out of area buyers and we're getting a lot of out of area people moving into our areas. You're dealing with a unknown. So if you got a guy that's in a 949 area code or a 714, or he's in Orange County, or he's in San Bernardino, or you know, it doesn't hurt to ask a few questions. I get it all the time. I get listing agents call me every day. It said, hey
Come here,
Jim,
come here.
hello.
Oh, hey, this is Rob. Sorry to interrupt. I was on mute the whole time, and I wondered why nobody was listening to me and everybody was cutting me off. It's because no one could hear me. Sorry.
Oh no, you're good now, Robbie. Go ahead.
Oh no, that's all I wanted to say. Sorry. You guys asked me my opinion, and I gave it, and then no one listened to me. But it was because I was on mute. Sorry about that.
Well, yeah, I guess you got to press unmute. That helps.
Yeah,
I'm not very good at reading signs or reading anything of that nature, but maybe we can work on that, Rob. But yeah, that's the secret sauce.
Rob,
So, so
there
you're
was
saying if
no
I
there
press
was no
mute, it
rejection on
ends
us. But anyways, so when you're looking at an offer, deciding who to take, I get calls from listing agents every day. They want to know. They want to know about their income. They want to know what their jobs are, how long they've been in their jobs, what the FICO score is. Where are you going to order the appraisal from? Is it an AMC? Is it going to be a local appraiser, or is it going to be some dude from Gardena coming out here to appraise, a Stratford? He doesn't even know what a Stratford is. So these are key questions when you guys are making decisions on whether you want to take an offer or not. So every day I get calls from agents every day asking me about my clients. Now, if you've got a lender, he doesn't return your call or he doesn't get back to you, then that should be a major red flag on if you're going to accept an offer. If you get a guy that's on the phone and he can't answer 5 or 6 of those simple questions that I just gave you, or he stumbles, or he's not sure, or he's got to get back to you, that's a red flag. If you get information sent over like conflicting information on a DU and it shows, on the bank account he's got 200,000 and you get a bank account and it only shows 10,000, that's a red flag. You know, these are major red flags because a lot of times, a lot of these guys are all doing is they're just saying anything to get their deal in because there's 5 or 10 offers, and they're saying anything they can just
Right.
to get their clients in the door, and then whatever they have to do to keep the deal going. Another thing that a lot of them are doing is they're saying, "Hey, it's 20% down conventional," and then they switch it in escrow and they're going FHA. Um,
I
you
have
know,
one right now. I have one right now that all of a sudden we got the so-called thing about some issues with some fraudulent credit that they're going to have to switch and go with the the wife's credit on my listing and then go FHA. So that's an interesting thing that all of a sudden, boom, yeah.
Yeah, that's one of those where you notice to perform and you should kick their butt and go, dude, who you don't need that shit, Danny. Just it's a headache you don't need. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's one of those if you're not giving us the right information, then move on to the next one. That's what I say. It's a lot of times you don't need the headache. So you look at it in those sense. But we've all been in the business long enough to save ourselves time, energy, and effort. And I think it really is important to note that when you're looking at offers or you're accepting an offer, you want to make sure that it's the right offer so you're not wasting time. When you guys look at your offers, Rob or Blanca, what do you guys specifically look at besides the price? What are you looking out there? Do you have any clues as to what makes you feel comfortable?
Well,
Like,
right now it's just the down payment. If it's a good down payment,
yeah, yeah, good down payment.
What do you guys consider a good down payment? Like 20% or more, or what's good for you, Robbie? What do you like?
well, this next one, if we're lucky enough to get the price the guy wants, it's not going to appraise. So I need something above 20%. So I'm not going to take an FHA or a VA.
Yeah. What do you guys do? That's a great question, Rob Blanca. That brings up a really good question. Anybody else who wants to join in on this? But so, Rob, you're going to get an overbid price. So where do you feel comfortable at? What's a number? 10,000 over, 20,000 over, 25,000 over. We got them as going as high as $50,000 over asking price. So the question is, what do you feel comfortable with, and who you're dealing with at that point to make something like that work? I mean, the guy might have said he was putting 20% down. Can you make that work with $30,000 over at list price? How would that work? Well, a lot of times what people are doing is, if they have 20%, Rob, what they'll do is they'll take a part of that 20%, and that will be the overflow of what the difference is on the appraisal. So if the appraisal was supposed to come in at 830,000 and only comes in at 800,000, part of that 20% down payment, now 30,000 of that goes towards the overlay, and they have less of a loan amount. They start to pay a little bit more PMI, but at least they have enough money to cover the new purchase price plus the difference in the loan amount. That's really important when you're trying to put a deal together. So give you an example. If I have a 10% down and the appraisals comes in less, and I've got to now come up with an extra 10,000, I can always switch that 10% to a 5%, use that 5% to pay the difference, and I still save the deal. You follow what I'm saying, guys?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, we know. And see, and the thing is, some of the agents, they're removing so many contingencies.
Yeah.
And for me, it's a red flag, because then you're looking at the bank account and they don't even have enough money. And when they doing that, in my opinion, many times the buyers, they don't even know what's going on, and they're not going to be willing to pay that much difference when the appraisal comes, like to pay 20. If they got 20% down payment, they're not expecting to put all that 20% to cover the difference. Maybe 10,000, maybe 15,000, So for me, what I look in my offers is if I have communication with the agent and I can see there is a real thing and they got money in their bank and they calling me back, and it's when I say this is a good offer. They got the money, they know what they're doing, and they're not removing all the contingencies, because this doesn't make sense.
You're spot on, Blanca, spot on.
Yeah.
And remember this, guys, if you're not sure of something and you just want a second opinion of eyes, you can always send it to me and go, hey, Jim, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? So Blanca, if you got a deal and you're not sure of something, you want me to review it for you, I'm more than happy to, even if they're working with somebody else. At least you'll get a second set of professional eyes on it. That way you guys know that at least if you accept the offer, it's going to be a real offer. So I have one right now. I have one of my agents. She asked me to review a DU this morning. It's on a jumbo purchase, and so the first thing I looked at the DU, and it's approved and eligible, because you can't get only Freddie and Fannie can you get approved DUs. So I knew right away there's an issue with it right to begin with. So then I start analyzing and look at it, and just the same thing in Blanca just said a second ago. They don't have enough money. They didn't even have reserves. On a jumbo loan, when a purchase, you got to have at least 3 months reserves. They didn't even have that in their bank account. So you know right away, this is a
And
this is
that's the
got a
thing I
problem.
advise sellers, when I'm reviewing offers and I'm looking at it and I got multiple offers and people are promising to remove contingencies, whatever. Yes, I look at their bank accounts, I look at what they have. And then when I advise a seller, I basically tell them, look, they're going to try to renegotiate you after the appraisal, after the home inspection. They're going to do what they can to lock you in. We got to go with somebody that has the money. I
Right.
also reach out to the lender and see, can they go higher and see where they're at? I really try. Most lenders, if they're smart, and most good agents will only show you a pre-qualification up to the price, not beyond what they qualify for. And I'm
Right,
sure they can go up. That's just smart move. That's smart real estate. But the idea is you got to ask the questions. And just because somebody's promising the moon, you got to look at the entire thing. There's nothing wrong with putting on the MLS an agent remark or countering somebody saying buyer to cross qualify with Jim Doty with JMJ Financial. I have that on my counters. I have that in my MLS disclosures under agent
right,
remark. I know that if Jim says they're okay, if they're willing to go through that loop, if something goes wrong, I have a backup file.
sure.
Yes.
Yeah, and
It's just putting them through the loop.
that's the same thing too. It's like when you guys are, whether it's a buyer or a seller that you're working with, you want to make sure that your headaches are not at the beginning. You want to resolve those at the beginning so that it's a smoother transaction, so that when you have a green light from either me or somebody like me, you have confidence that you can take these guys out and work with them, and you're not going to have any problems. I mean, we don't even we get everything up front these days. I mean, I get all their documentation. Literally, if you're out showing a property, I have no problem with that. And you just met them, whatever, and then you call me and get them on the phone. I had two of them yesterday, and they called me. I literally had my staff email them a link and a list of what they need to get over to us. Our system's very quick, very fast, and now I have two buyers that are completely qualified, and I have their FICO scores, I have their information, I have their W-2s, I have a full package on them, so that they're legitimate buyers and they're really out there looking. So that when you put an offer into somebody else, I have the confidence to say to the other side, I can get our approvals in. We're getting our loan approvals are within a week. I'm getting like 4 or 5 days actual loan approvals back. So that's very tough times. I just had a deal right now where I'm closing it literally in about 16 days. I had a bank foreclosure on another guy that I'm literally going to close in 19 days. So I mean that's taking some speed and getting some things done. When you can say that on the other side that you can get the approval done, or I can get my appraisers out there, within a timely manner. It's pretty quick because Ben's usually really good. In fact, I just had a deal on. I was just telling Dan about this. I had a deal where we literally waited for a sale to close. The appraisals were coming in around 755. My clients needed 815,000, and there was a deal closing for 835. We literally held up the appraisal for a couple of days with all the agents involved, and sure enough, the 835 closed, and boom, we came right behind it, and my clients got their 815 and didn't have to lay out 30, 40,000 extra dollars. So these are good things to know, and your clients, those clients love the agent and me. They're gonna send us a ton of business because we saved them 30, 40,000 extra dollars out of their pocket,
Yeah.
just by a simple thing, and this takes knowledge. Most lenders won't do that. They send out an appraiser, whatever comes in, they work with it, blah, 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 back and forth. I have direct contact, so I can pick up the phone and call my appraiser and say, hey, Ben, what's it look like out there? Blah, blah, blah. And then we start talking about it. And then we look at what's listings and what's closing, and do we have something around the neighborhood? That's very rare in our business these days. So it's going to help you, it's going to help your clients, and they're going to love you.
Hey, Jim.
Yep.
Probably, I'm wondering if you can answer this question. I'm sure some of the agents would be interested in this, but when you seeing, for example, on TV, lenders saying you can refi, you can buy now with no closing costs. We know there's no free lunch. How do lenders make money, and how do they get around that? What's the real scoop?
It's one of Danny. You brought up the question of. I hate that question. It's such a sore subject because what they do. Here's what they do, folks. They give you a higher interest rate. They take the rebate and they pay the closing cost. So if your client pays his freaking $3,300 for a refinance, and he could have gotten 2.5%, instead what they do is they give him 2.75 to 2.875, and they take the 3,000 off the back end and they pay for their closing costs. There's no free lunch here. So whenever these bozos advertise no cost, no money, blah, blah, blah. I have to educate the public every single flipping day about rates and programs. And I have clients every day saying, oh, I can get 1.95. I had a client literally come into my office. He's a good client of mine I've had for years, right? Comes into my office, he shows me this postcard and it's, some crazy number. And I said, oh, let's call him. Let's get him on the phone. So we get him on the phone and we start talking to him, and so we get down to the nitty gritty, and the guy goes, now I was going to give the guy like 2.5, and this advertisement was like at 2.1, and so he gets him on the phone, and we start asking questions, and the next thing you know, he says, oh yeah, we can get the 2.1. It's only going to cost you $10,000. So it cost him nothing for the 2.5, which if he pays the 2.1, it cost him $10,000, and it only saved him $60 in payment. It was a $60 difference between the 2.5 and spending $10,000 out of your pocket. So there's a lot of deceptive type of advertising that's unfair. I don't like it. I like to give the clients the best deals possible. I'd rather my clients pay their fees because it's a better rate for them, the lowest rate they could possibly get. When I have to give them fees or something of this nature, then you're talking about raising the rates because, like I said, nobody works for free.
Exactly. I had to bring it up because, again, you see those things advertised. You see escrow company, zero fee escrow. And Rob and I were talking about that yesterday. But if it's too good to be true, it is too good to be true. And
It's too good to be true. I literally had a client. I had a client yesterday. Like I said, I get clients all the time. They ask me these questions. I deal with this every day. And there was one client. I had him at 3.125, and he goes, "Oh, I got this company. It's giving me in the twos." And I go, "Wow, in the twos." And I look at his loan amount, look at his FICO score, and I'm like, "Man, I don't see how you're doing that." So then he sends me over the thing, and it's actually the rate's 2.99, which is really 3%,
great.
and
Yeah.
I'm at 3 1/8, and he's paying a half a point to get that. I'm like, "Oh, wait a minute." I show him it's 2.99, which is really 3%, and then I show him he's charging you 0.5% to get that. So, anyways, there's always an answer to these issues. Sometimes, hey, I'll be the first one to admit maybe there is a bank out there that does better than me, and I can't compete. And I'll tell them right up front. I said, hey, I can't. Unfortunately, I can't meet how they're doing it. Sometimes they buy them. What they do is they buy the market. Like big banks sometimes or things will want to buy the market. I know for a fact that banks rates on FHAs are worse. Their VAs are horrible. Their jumbos are usually bad on the high balance. So usually we're pretty competitive on those levels. It just depends. But if it's something I can't beat, I'll tell them. Hey, this is a
Yeah,
good rate. Go for it. Any
Jim,
questions on that?
yes, Jim, I have a question. Some lenders they say I'm a direct lender. So
Yes.
what's the difference between the direct lender and the lenders they say we're
And a
not a
broker?
direct lender?
Yeah,
I'm
let
a
me give you
broker.
that. That's a great question, Blanca. That's a very, very good question. So a broker is someone who has multiple banks that he sends his loans to. So a broker can send the loan to Wells, U.S. Bank, Citibank. They go out to about 4 or 5 different lenders, and they
Mhm.
all have different guidelines, and they all have different pricing, and they all have different requirements. So that's a broker. So he can go out to multiple sources. On a direct lender, we have our own money. I'm a direct lender. So we have a warehouse line of our own money. So we have our own underwriting in-house. We have our own processing in-house. We have everything in-house. So There is no sending out to, 5 or 6 different banks, waiting on them for an appraisal or waiting on them to fund a loan or whatever they need to do. Direct lenders are generally better because we have our own money, we're dealing with our own underwriting, and usually we can fund on fax copies. We can fund on a fax copy versus brokers where they've got to have the actual loan back. It's got to be reviewed by, this department, that department. Broker doesn't have any control. It's really the bank that they submit the loan to. Now they have a working relationship with them. Don't get me wrong, but it's not like me. I can pick up the phone right now, call the owner of my bank, and say, "Hey, how are we going to get this done?" And he says, "Oh, let's do it this way," and blah blah blah. And he, types 2 seconds later, and the loan's funded and done. So it's a big difference between a direct lender and a broker. So that's the difference, Blanca. The direct lender is basically self-sufficient, in-house, and has everything. Their own money. They fund with their own money.
Yes, good.
Good question.
Direct
Very good
lenders.
question. Let's thank Jim for his time. If you guys need to reach him, you can
Thank you,
reach him
Jim.
at
Thanks, guys.
Jim at dotyteam.com. Jim at
Thank you.
dotyteam.com. For those of you that are interested, we're going to have our interactive group role play call this Thursday and every Thursday, 11:30, and I'll send information on that. This recording will be sent to everyone. Jim, thank you so much.
Thanks,
And feel
guys.
free to reach out to Jim if you guys have any loans or refis or you need to have somebody cross-qualify as well, or just pick his brains.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
guys. Really appreciate it. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jim.
Bye-bye.